our paper in this issue is promoting life competences in a knowledge society, the contribution of building the knowledge building model for educational systems. And the first author is Stefano Cacciamani from University di Val'Aosta. And I'm the second author, Nobuko Fujita, at the University of Windsor, which is in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, just across the border from Detroit, Michigan. So I'm talking about the knowledge society that is sort of a central concept for understanding the social and cultural context of our paper. And it's really important to understand and plan for the future in contemporary societies as well. In the European Union, developing a knowledge societies has been identified as a really key goal. But the concept of a knowledge society can be traced back, to the 1960s. So we had the idea of knowledge as something that could be produced and distributed in the economy. And then later, Peter Drucker came up with, he actually coined the term knowledge society, where he said it's a new type of economy that sees knowledge as a fundamental resource. And that represents a discontinuity or change from the previous eras where knowledge was not viewed so much as something that could be created and be worked with, so to speak. Just a little preview. We were interested in looking at comparing the Life Comp framework from the EU that was going to help us to manage the challenges posed by the many transitions taking place in our rapidly changing society. So people need to develop competences that allow them to manage that challenges in their personal lives, in the social spheres, and in learning to learn. So they're engaging in lifelong learning and adapting to different settings, whether they're in schools, from the kindergarten to 12 system onto higher education and beyond to the workplace as people change careers or need to upskill their competences. As you can see in this diagram, which has sort of the design metaphor of the tree, going clockwise from the left, indicated over here. I guess I can see my cursor, right? We have the personal competences with well-being, flexibility, and self-regulation. Moving on clockwise to the top here, which are the social competences of empathy, communication, and collaboration. And then finally to the learning to learn section with the growth mindset, critical thinking, and managing learning. And these, as you can see, are overlapping and intertwined. So those are the 9 competences of the European Life Comp framework. And then we wanted to analyze it with regard to the knowledge building model, which I guess is more of a North American model, though it's been adopted and researched by researchers all around the world, Europe, Asia, and otherwise. Originally, it was developed by Carl Breiter and Marlene Scaradamalia at the University of Toronto, and they started this work in the late 1980s, developing from their cognitive psychology work on procedural writing and intentional learning. So Carl and Marlene wondered if, inspired by Karl Popper's philosophy of science of the 3 worlds, where world 1 represents concrete elements of the physical world, world 2 are the representation in the minds of individual people, and then world 3, the which is really the stage of knowledge in a socially shared way. So they propose that maybe we can envision education as doing sort of the work of scientists, where they create, improve, and advance the state of knowledge. Just like the objective science, they're going to have students engage in that transformative process and have them work in communities within their classrooms, and also connecting to other communities. So other classrooms around the world, to scientists and other experts, and so on. So a little bit of a radical and constructivist type model, and quite a departure from the transmission or banking concept of education. The knowledge building model has been systematized since the beginning of the 2000s. So there are a set of 12 social and technical principles that describe the organizational conditions necessary to operational the model in a real classroom. These principles I've represented in a kind of a word cloud of sorts. We'll talk more about each one a little bit later on. But essentially, we have real ideas and authentic problems. A key goal is improvable ideas, idea diversity, rise above, epistemic agency, community knowledge, democratizing knowledge, and so on. Now, knowledge building is not just a theory and a pedagogy. It also has an accompanying technology that makes it very unique. This is, there's a screenshot here of Knowledge Forum, which is both a client and web-based software that has been used in schools with students, very young students, all the way up to higher education and workplace contexts. It's possibly one of the most researched platforms for this kind of work. It's designed iteratively based on empirical research over 30 years, with different kinds of students in different kinds of contexts, whether it's in a face-to-face classroom with the technology, or in a fully online context, especially with the graduate education and workplace contexts. How is this different from another discussion-based environment? Each of the little squares that you see on the screen, and this is in the graphical view, represents notes, which would be the same as a post or message in another forum. And then they work in this space called a view instead of a forum. And what's different, I think, from a typical threaded discussion environment is that when students reply to others in the learning community, it's called a build on. And you can see that with arrows, to ask questions and bring in new information, whether it's from authoritative sources, whether it's a text-based resource or multimedia, they can link that. And then they work to progressively improve their ideas. And once they have sort of achieved a synthesis, they can write what's called rise above. And that's indicated here with this red oval that we added. So that lets students see the advancements that they made through discussion and in their learning in a way that other platforms haven't been able to do, and that the knowledge building principles and the pedagogies sort of embodied in the design of that software. Okay. So what we did is we took the different life comp areas and sort of mapped them onto the knowledge building principles underlying the knowledge building model. So you'll see in this personal area, there are 3 competences identified, and then we mapped the knowledge building principles onto them. So one of the big parts in the personal area is self-regulation, and then in knowledge building also is something called epistemic agency. Now there's a paper that Carl and Marlene wrote back in 1991 that talks in depth about it, but really epistemic agency, like self-regulation, is this idea of recognizing the personal and collective responsibility for the success of their knowledge building efforts. And so the participants set forth their ideas and negotiate a fit between their idea and those of others. And it's really not depending on others, perhaps a teacher, but for the students to take on that cognitive responsibility to work with others and advance that knowledge. So you'll also see that in order to do that, they need to be flexible. They have to have that competence. They're working in knowledge building with real ideas and authentic problems. So they're problem solving based on their interest on a particular curricular topic. Of course, real ideas are messy, and so students are encouraged to work with the principle of improvable ideas, that they can just share an idea that's not fully conceptualized. They can post half-baked notions as long as they subsequently try to improve them. So it might not be completely correct. And it's amazing to see students jump in and try to improve what a peer has said. Well-being is a competence in Life Comp framework. In knowledge building, the corresponding principle is community knowledge. So we're pursuing knowledge of value to others. It's not just our own idea that we're fascinated with, and that contributes to the well-being of that community, whether it's a classroom and they're interested in something like why the leaves change color in the fall, but it could also be related to the outside world, their own communities, in terms of things like climate change or the environment that they're starting to experience through the seasons and through the weather and so on. And of course, that brings around a feeling of contributing to the knowledge and contributing to the community. Okay, the social area, it's very much because it's a discussion-based pedagogy. I think knowledge building can contribute to the Life Comp framework, where there's a symmetric knowledge advancement. So this is a slightly different definition of empathy that you'll see in our paper. And it's focused more on the cognitive rather than the emotional element. So there's the sense where the expertise is distributed amongst everyone. So it's idea. Yes, I'm running out of time. So discussion. So there's the importance of communication through knowledge building discourse, democratizing knowledge, the collaboration aspect with the also matching principles. So I'm just going to show the learning to learn table here, which you can read in much more depth than our paper. I think that's really important to knowledge building, and you'll see epistemic agency come up repeatedly because it's key to understanding how to promote the life competences. And finally, I'll have my conclusion here. So this article in sum analyzed the possibility of using the knowledge building model to promote competences indicated by the life comp framework. We hypothesized that knowledge building can contribute to developing competences among students, and we mapped the knowledge buildings to each of the competences in the three personal, social, and learning to learn areas of the framework. And we also provided evidence from the literature on knowledge building to support our hypothesis. So finally, then, the Life Comp framework can now draw on the knowledge building research to develop curricula and learning activities for schools more at the institutional level, along with the stakeholders, because we are big promoters of design-based research and including stakeholders in improving teaching and learning. And that is it of my presentation. So I'll stop the slides.
Yes, Nobuko, very interesting, the proposal I see. And I was thinking all the time about this lifelong learning development that we are promoting in a certain way. And you're talking about context of more, if I understood well, formal education, but I see very powerful also to be applied in communities of practice with professionals. That could be a model that could guide better a community of practice. I don't know if you thought about that, but probably I leave this challenge probably for an next research. But
right.
Anything.
Thank you for your insight, Marcelo. I think we've all considered community of practice to go beyond the boundaries of the classroom for sure. We haven't written a paper per se about it, but we should maybe work towards that. Great idea. Thank you. I think Carlo had a hand up. Yeah.
Yeah. Also considering the observation by Marcelo, and what I've said during my presentation, actually the life comps has some limitation, especially in the social competences. Okay, you have seen the mapping. So I just would like to advise to try to map also other frameworks. And eventually it will be very nice to test also with the stakeholder what they think about. I mean, if they find that the life comp is a complete framework for life competencies or not. So this will be very interesting to be explored.
I think so. Thank you, Carlo. Yes, I'm interested in that social part as well. Very much so, with especially with how people see the community.